empowerment happen. But we must know that we can prevent domestic violence from ever taking one more of our sisters, of our brothers, of our family members, of our neighbors and co-workers. Again, we have an obligation and a responsibility as Zimbabweans to ensure that doesn't happen. And together, we can prevent another child having to experience the abuse, death of a parent and the consequent orphanhood. The Anti-Domestic Violence Council is therefore calling upon communities to report suspected cases of domestic violence. And by the way, the Domestic Violence Act enables us to do third-party reporting. So it's no longer the affected person reporting, but those that observe the violence can report. So we all have an obligation to report. And victims of domestic violence to report such cases and never to remain in violent relationships. It is better to walk away from a violent relationship than to lose your life in it. And we are also calling on policymakers to commit themselves and play their part in ending domestic violence. And we are calling for stiffer penalties to be imposed on perpetrators of domestic violence. And we are calling on families to unequivocally condemn domestic violence and challenge prevailing beliefs, norms, and values that feed and normalize and perpetuate domestic violence. We are calling on communities to develop a culture of zero tolerance to domestic violence, regardless of its scope. We are calling on community leaders to speak openly against domestic violence and create community-based responses, and also protection systems. We are also calling on service providers to promptly provide quality services to victims of sexual violence and other offenses and ensure timely access to justice. Finally, colleagues, we reiterate the fact that domestic violence happens in every community and happens across economic, social, ethnic, racial, educational backgrounds. Anyone can be a victim of domestic violence. Domestic violence also happens in upmarket, quiet, and so-called safe neighborhoods. In fact, abuse thrives the most in secrecy. And also the perceptions in public opinion that it is a personal or family matter does not help. So most importantly, we must remember that according to Section 52 of our Constitution, the Zimbabwe Constitution of 2013, every Zimbabwean has a right to personal security and bodily integrity. That freedom from abuse or fear is a right to every victim and child who witnesses or experiences domestic violence. This is why, as caring community members, we must do more. It is our responsibility to learn more about this scourge so that we can help more. We are all urged to speak out and to take actions to end domestic violence in Zimbabwe. And so we are making finally a call to Zimbabweans and asking this question as the anti-domestic violence. Are you experiencing domestic violence yourself? Do you want to know if a relationship is abusive or do you suspect abuse? Do you know someone experiencing domestic violence? We are asking these questions because they are often not asked. And so this is how domestic violence is perpetuated. So we're saying it is important to take domestic violence seriously, get information, and share resources. Help is available in Zimbabwe, in every province, district, and some wards for every victim through a network of programs dedicated to serving domestic violence victims and their families. Similarly, as you know, the Ministry of Women Affairs, Community Small, Medium Enterprise Development is present in every province, in every district, and in many instances, in many wards. And they do have information as the home of the agency for coordinating and advancing gender equality. They have the information and the resources that can be shared, so that when you are in need of help, or you know someone who is in need of help, they can point you to the service providers that are in their area. So let's not let our communities suffer in silence or of ignorance. There are resources that are available. Let's encourage communities to step out to report. We also know that the Zimbabwe Republic Police has a specialized victim-friendly unit at every police station that is competent and capable of handling domestic violence cases. So our clarion call is, let us seek help for ourselves and for others that are affected by domestic violence. And we're saying it is never, never too late to seek help. And I close with that statement and open the floor for discussions, for questions, for comments. And please do understand that the sole purpose is so that we can work together to end domestic violence in Zimbabwe. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We now open the floor to questions. May we please make our questions very short and precise. Yes, your name and your question.
My name is Bruno Togas, Spectrum Magazine.
Okay.
And you gave us statistics you got from the police.
Yes.
But we would have wanted you to give us also how the courts have actually dealt with those cases. And in 2018, I think it's now 4 months into a new year. And you're saying it's still compiling. But police, they already have the statistics. And suppose a case has been dealt with in the courts and you are not satisfied. What do you do as the council?
I think let's take 2 or 3 questions, then we can respond.
Okay, can we have another question?
I think it's true that the statistics are going up. But I think as a council was saying, even one statistic is one too many. And one of the things that we are doing as we speak as a council is that we have entered into an understanding together with our partner SAT and UNFPA to look at police records for the past 3 years, so that we do an in-depth analysis of what cases are being reported, who is reporting, how and where are they reporting from. And we are hoping that that information, that analysis will help us to understand what is driving domestic violence in Zimbabwe, and therefore our response is appropriate. Perhaps just to make this clarification that as an anti-domestic violence council, we have more a coordination and oversight role. We do not do direct implementation. We have partners that we work with within government, within civil society organizations, and even UN agencies who have a mandate to respond directly to domestic violence. But our role is to ensure that the services are provided, that they are quality services, that there's support for both survivors and rehabilitation for perpetrators, and also to ensure that there is knowledge out there by the public that domestic violence is wrong. So we are limited in that way, in that we don't do direct programming, but these kinds of conversations for us are extremely important, because then we get to appreciate the work that is going on, the perspectives of media houses and what we should do. And then to the colleague from Spectrum Magazine, we are hoping that as part of the research mandate that we have as a council, that we can look at that. In fact, a few months back, some of us made a visit to the domestic violence court at the civil court on 4th. And it was dismaying just to see the overwhelming numbers of cases that are going there, the range of cases that are going there, and you can see that the officers, you wonder if they've even time to breathe. You know, it's just an intractable situation. So you are really right that it's important for us to have a hands-on on the pulse of how are the courts handling these cases. In cases where I'm not happy with the resolution of what's my recourse, we have a responsibility as a council indeed to look into that. Well, in terms of statistics, and I'm hoping that Maggie can say a little more, that we are trying to fine-tune, I think, our link with the police so that we get timely access to information. And I think that is not just the police, because like you said, this is probably a tip of the iceberg in terms of the statistics, because they are not coming from direct service providers, as it were. These are reported cases. There are other cases that are reported through other organizations that don't make it to the police statistics. So indeed, there's still a lot of work to be done. So I hope that some of the things that will come out of here is how do we better oil this machine so that it works better. Otherwise, there's no end in sight for domestic violence. So I think these questions are well taken, and I think they show some of the work that still needs to be done by the council.
Okay, I would like to acknowledge the presence of UNFPA. They're with us in the room. They've been supporting the work of the council technically and financially. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Musasa. I'm sure we all know the great work that they're doing in assisting survivors of domestic violence. I'll take more questions. I saw your hand up, sir.
My name is Peter Tenyango. I'm coming from the suburb. I want to know that is this council for women, men well represented, and if they are, can you, of those cases that you mentioned, can you tell me maybe statistics of women that have been convicted? Because we know that women are really also participating in domestic violence. Yeah.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Recently, there was some media reports of the Vice President Kembomai being indicated.
Again, for those insightful questions. A men represented on the council, yes, they are. If you're talking about the actual council, we have 3 men that sit with us. They couldn't be here, but it would have been good to have them here. Because I think also some of the 4 men, yes, I beg your pardon. There are 4 men that sit with us out of a 12-member team. We could do more, but I think as a council, we're very clear that gender refers to both women and men. But I think, in all honesty, as you heard from the statistics, women are disproportionately affected by domestic violence. And so sometimes the concerns come from that. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, otherwise our responses become inappropriate. But I think there are efforts too, and there's an understanding that in order to end domestic violence, it's important to engage men as perpetrators and also as survivors. So I think the council has that understanding. But I think it's the broader question of how do we define that so that we don't have another layer of patriarchy, of male preference in the name of male inclusion and male participation. And I think we should keep these discussions going because they are real. So that we then shift all resources and focus to men, because we're saying, we are the men. And I'm hoping that as media, you can bring up these issues very clearly, because that's where we get stuck, in the equality discourse, we understand that it's men and women together, but I think statistics show us that there is disproportionate effect of both GBV and the subset domestic violence on women than men. Is that the case? I hope so. I hope we all acknowledge that. And then the other question is,
in terms of women and girls who are coming to report, and if we were to compare 2013 and 2018, in 2013 we would get cases close to 13,000 but as of 2018, we got cases close to 26,000, which is a double. Yes, it's also a sign that the work that partners are doing in the field is giving us results, because I think the effort has also been to raise awareness on the rights of women and girls and the services that are also available for them in the event that they've undergone domestic violence. And it's also a sign that women are also aware of the services that are available. But at the same time, we also need to acknowledge, like what she has also mentioned, that the services at the moment are not adequate to cater for every woman and girl, and all these services, these are some of the issues that we are also fighting for, to ensure that women and girls have access to readily available services in the event that they've undergone some form of violence.
You have the follow-up question, Chair.
Okay, there was a question on support for.
Oh, you wanted to, sorry. You wanted to add to, it's a question.
On support for victims when perpetrators have been incarcerated. The Ministry of Women Affairs has various packages where they would train, specifically identify such women, train them in different skills, offer them loans through the Women's Development Fund, also refer to the Women's Microfinance Bank, so that it's not just giving handouts, but giving them skills to be able to sustain themselves as they take care of their families in the absence of the breadwinner. Okay.
Yeah, I think to add to that, thank you very much, Mike, for reminding us of that question. And I know that a lot of the service providers, Mr. certainly are intimately knowledgeable about the work that they do, is that they are taking a holistic approach to sheltering services, that I may be running away from harm, but I need to go back to the community. So you find that in instances where women come in and they do not have appropriate skills, it's amazing the skilling efforts that go on, so that when she goes back to the community, never mind what has happened to the perpetrator, she is able to fend for herself. And those integrated processes of service provision more and more are being defined and really growing in leaps and bounds, just to take care of the questions that you asked, and then what happens, because we know that a lot of the cases also are dropped because women say, what are we going to eat if we send him to prison? And so they withdraw cases based on that. So based on that consciousness, and of course the right to economic empowerment of women and girls, we find that a lot of the service providers dealing with domestic violence more and more are coming up with integrated services where they economically empower, offer psychosocial support for survivors. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
In terms of the issues of empowering women that are affected